And 7 Stories has been such a wonderful format to have here. We're so happy that we can host it and share it with everybody. Thank you, Scott, for putting it live on the B-Town blog. One thing we do with every gathering we do here is to take a moment to recognize that we are on native land, and we like to thank in honor of those who preceded us here, including the people of the Duwamish, Suquamish, Nisqually, and Muckleshoot tribes. So thank you. And I would like to let everybody know that we are so appreciative that you come to the museum, not just for the 7 Stories, but other events we have here. And we invite you to become members. Thank you. I will now turn the mic over to your MC, Peggy.
So it's really nice to have so many of you here. As she said, my name is Peggy. I'm a storyteller and a volunteer with 7 Stories. And I'm a short notice MC tonight, so you will have to forgive me if I rely on my notes a lot. But these nights of storytelling have been a really wonderful thing for our community, and they are available to us because of the support that we have from not only our volunteers, but the sponsors. The Highline Heritage Museum, the B-Town blog, thank you, both of you, the City of Burien, the Burien Arts Association, the Burien Culture Hub, and Greater Highline Community with its talented storytellers. And I have to say, I've just lived in Burien for 3 years, and all of this is one of the reasons why I love being here. So it's really nice to be a part of this community. Tonight's theme is coming home. And home can be different for each of us. It can be a place, a memory, a dream, or a reality. But whatever it is for you, we have storytellers tonight who are going to share their story of coming home. So we will start the evening with, yes, of course, Eric, I knew you would remind me. Another housekeeping, lift that number. You get 7 minutes to tell your story, and if you happen to see Eric waving this paper plate with the number 1 on it, you have 1 minute left. So that he's our official timer. He won't we won't turn off the mic, but try not to go too far beyond that last minute, okay? So our first speaker tonight is Abby Rolnick. She is a resident of Burien, retired and a teller of tales and a lover of life, and her short piece is entitled Finding Home. Abby?
Can you see me? Can everybody see me? In case you hadn't noticed, I'm even shorter than Peggy. And because I'm not very tall, I just want you to know I've been this way since day one. Now, when they talk to you about, when you're a baby, they don't look for height. What they look for is, do you have eyebrows? Yes. Are your eyes open? Yes. Do you have pudgy cheeks? Yes. Do you have dimples? Yes. They never, particularly with me, mention my height. Now, the other thing about being small is, can you hear me? Can you all hear me? Mm-hmm. Yes. All right. So the first thing I learned when I was a kid, they said kids are to be seen and not heard. Now I'm here to inform you that's not true. For a small person, that does not go very far, at least not in my book. So I learned very early to speak my mind and to speak it with authority. Now when I'm speaking in public, I have a presence. But I'll tell you that I also have a presence in other situations. I'll give you an example. This is how my husband described me to 3 hunters who came down a little inebriated with their guns on our private road. And the first thing they said to my husband, "You better watch out for this lady up there. She is a mother bear. She is so vicious and angry, and she's huge. She takes up the whole road while she's patrolling. And she's pretty scary. And so he's telling me, little old me, how I am. So, you know, I can be a big presence. But there's something else that's a little bit more important than just size. It is anything that impedes your way, anything that makes you uncomfortable is not good. Now, those of you who do know me know that I walk in the evenings. I love to walk the neighborhoods. Now, the thing is, the seasons have changed, and it's rainy and wet and cold. And this thing the earth does, rotating around the sun, oh man. And then there's the time change. I don't like it. I really don't like it. And so I took it in my own hands to do something different. So since I don't like being cold, I have to be seen, right? And I want to be protected. I went and bought, if you bear with me, I went and bought a Land's End quilted coat. Now I'm going to have to put it on, so. Now I thought that was genius, because guess what? People can see me. And guess what? I'm protected. And I've got this nice little hood, and it's water repellent. So here we go. I have this, and now I'm all set up. And to top it off, I bought these shoes. On cloud, waterproof, water reproof. Now I promise you, nobody has compensated me, Land's End or on, to mention these things. Now one thing you have to know is that when you get dressed and you're small, no store carries your size. Forget the stores. There's no shoes that fit you, and there's no clothes that fit you. So I bought them online. It's just a fact, happened to be small. Now I put this on, and my first debut in it was on Halloween night. I was walking to my daughter's house, 25-minute walk, not too far, on 146 and 22nd. Now there are thousands of kids walking around. I've got my coat on, and I'm thinking, oh boy, I'm Snow White. I'm elegant. I've got a spring in my thing, and I have a presence. Sure enough, cars stop, people wave, people stop and chit-chat with me, and I am feeling so good. I am feeling like a princess, you know? Then I got home, and I looked in the mirror, and I said, oh, I don't think those bystanders were thinking that I looked like Snow White. No way. I think they think I look like Pillsbury Doughboy or the Marshmallow Lady. Or it could be that, like when I had the hazmat outfit on when I was taking the police academy volunteer thing, you know, this bubbly little thing walking down. I said, no matter, it doesn't matter. I looked in the mirror, I took off the coat, and I said, you know, here I am. And what you do is you found there I stood, proud, perfect posture, aligned, and full of myself. I felt really good. And then I thought, I was protected, I was comfortable, and I was seen. I was home. I had found myself. So here I am, home. And then I thought, what is the definition of home? It is feeling safe and feeling content and happy in your own skin. Being seen by others for who you are and not having to be perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. I'm going to be smiling a lot remembering that. And I want to see you in that coat every evening. It is perfect. Our next speaker is Fred Swanson. Fred grew up in Southeast Virginia and has spent the last 22 years in Washington. A very good choice, I might say. And his 3 kids are grateful someone else can take over listening to many of his silly stories, if only for a night. I'm already going to smile. Come on up, Fred.
So I'm in the front seat of a 1981 Volkswagen Rabbit. I'm 12 years old, and I'm heading home from Winchester, Virginia, the Virginia Student Council Association annual meeting. To my left is Miss McNamara, our advisor to the Student Council, and we are heading home, and I'm defeated. This all started in 5th grade when I was chosen for the gifted program. And in Virginia, the way they do the gifted program is you go to a school on Wednesday, and that's the gifted part, and then you go to your home school on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And so the agreement was that your teacher would give you your assignments on Tuesday when you left, and so you would have them so that when you came back on Thursday, you would not only have the gifted experience, but you would also have your assignments so you weren't behind. Well, my teacher, Mrs. Robinson, in 5th grade, was not having it, and she was really irritated with all of us going to the special school on Wednesdays, so she never gave us the assignments, and that really irritated me. So I decided what I needed to do was get Mrs. Robinson fired. And the way that I was going to do that is I was going to run for election for student council president, and I was going to use that power to get rid of Mrs. Robinson. So I went home, I told my parents, hey, Mom, Dad, I want to run for student council. They were very excited about it. I didn't tell them why, but I did tell them that I was running for president. And my father helped me with this produce themed campaign. We had a head of lettuce, and it said, let us vote for Fred. We had bananas, it said, you'd be bananas if you don't vote for Fred. We had oranges, it said, orange you glad, Fred is running for president. And I won. And after winning, I went home and I said, Mom, I won the election. And by the way, the reason I'm excited about this is because we can get rid of Mrs. Robinson. My mother was the PTA president, so I said we can form an alliance and we can together get rid of Mrs. Robinson in 5th grade. My mother said, you're an idiot. And she referred to what I was talking about as filth and foolishness, which is what my mother calls really anything that we do that's out of the ordinary or something that she doesn't agree with. So she said, absolutely not. I'm not going to form an alliance with you. And so I was really on my own at that point. I decided there were only a few other ways that I could exert some power, so I decided to run for regional representative for the student council. Maybe that would give me the power to get rid of Mrs. Robinson. So I ran and I won, representing 44 elementary schools in Tidewater, Virginia. Realized at that point that wasn't enough, so I was going to have to run for state office. And so I was getting ready for the state meeting in Winchester, Virginia. And I was thinking, because my parents weren't supporting me, what can I do to be powerful? How can I exude power and have these hundreds of elementary school students vote for me? And so I was watching television. I decided there were 3 figures in TV land in the 80s that I wanted to emulate. One was Mr. Rourke on Fantasy Island, who could make any fantasy come true. The second was Captain Stubing on the Love Boat, who would shepherd people on the high seas into love. And the third was Boss Hogg on the Dukes of Hazzard, because although he wasn't a benevolent leader, he was in charge, and he did maintain, his position as the mayor of Hazzard in spite of all of his antics. So I thought, what do these men have in common? They all wear white suits. So what I need is a white suit to give my speech. Again, my parents weren't supporting me, and so I didn't have a white suit, and all I had was these white cotton pleated pants, and that was as close as I was going to get. Fast forward, I'm giving my speech at the Virginia Student Council Association. I'm in my white cotton pleated pants, really winning these hundreds of students over from the stage, and then I realized that when you have hundreds of students, what do? You feed them like pizza and ice cream. We have the soft serve and the ice cream parties. Well, it wasn't agreeing with me. So I was there on stage. We had a pitcher of sweet tea that was keeping my mouth from getting dry. And I was realizing I had 2 choices. I either was going to need to leave the stage and go have explosive diarrhea in the bathroom, or I was going to need to speak really quickly so that I could leave the stage and go have explosive diarrhea in the bathroom. Unfortunately, neither of those things came true. Instead, on stage, I had explosive diarrhea in front of hundreds of elementary school students, and grabbed the pitcher of sweet tea and spilled it on myself so as to convince the students that the brown dripping down my white cotton pleated pants was in fact the sweet tea and not the diarrhea. Unfortunately, the smell betrayed me. It was obvious what had happened. I did not win the election, and so there I was, Driving home in the 81 Volkswagen Rabbit with Miss Mac by my side, I had my white cotton pleated pants in a bag, and she had given me a pair of shorts to wear. And as we rolled up to my house, defeated again, I thought, what have I learned from this? So the first thing I learned was that really nothing worse than that will ever happen. And so I should not be afraid to speak in public. The second thing, never argue with a fifth grade teacher. Teachers are always going to win. So just give in and do what they say. And then the third was, my mother was really clear about never bring home your filth and foolishness from out in the world. And so I realized I needed to throw those pants in the garbage can before coming inside, and I didn't tell her a word about what had happened.
Thank you, Fred. That was great. I'm sure all of us will be chuckling for the rest of the evening. The vision is wonderful. I don't own white pants, but that's okay. There's a reason.
Yeah, don't.
So our next speaker is Claire Yurden. She's a former newspaper reporter, small business partner, and researcher. The last 20 years in web and marketing. Stories about coming home to the old family house in North Seattle and renovating it. Claire?
I came home at age 50 with my teenage daughter. After 32 years away, I hadn't lived here except for very brief visits during all that time. However, my dad was widowed now in his mid-80s. It made sense to come back here. There was no family in the area. And my daughter could go to the UW after high school graduation and live at home. So I could get her through college. So it all added up, it made sense. So a home specifically was the old family house in North Seattle, which my parents bought in 1947. They bought it because it had 3 bedrooms, it was a pleasant neighborhood, it was near Dad's job, and there were good schools. I really had a wonderful childhood in this house. It was a very safe neighborhood. We roamed around by foot and bicycle freely and rotated, playing at the different houses, supervised by our stay-at-home mothers, who were the backbone of our childhoods back then. And Dad added things to the house. We had been put in lovely gardens of vegetables and fruits. There was a patio in the back where we barbecued in the lovely Seattle long summer evening. And I had a wonderful memory of my childhood in this house. Now, as Dad had gotten older, he'd lost his drive to maintain and improve the house. Things were falling apart a bit, the porches were crumbling, he'd let the beautiful gardens go to weeds, and just did the minimum. He got the lawn mowed and he had a cleaner come in. So I got to work on the gardens, enrolled my daughter in high school, and relaunched myself, which frankly was not easy. People seemed to want something else other than what was on my resume. I had a string of temp jobs and went to school nights to upgrade my computer skills. And eventually I got a decent job downtown and was on a more even keel. I made dinner for my little 3-generation family, and Dad and I would chat by the fireside nights, and it was really pleasant. Well, you really never know, how things are going to go. A year after we got here, my father got cancer of the pancreas and died after a 3-month illness. It really goes fast with cancer of the pancreas if you've ever, known anyone who had that. And he left me the house and some money. So now, my old family house was mine after all these years. It was mine, it was in my name. The very nicest part of the whole day was when I got off the bus from downtown, went around a corner, and there was my house sitting there waiting for me, and it was my house. However, I have to say it needed a lot of work. It had a leaking roof, it had rats in the basement, the porches were crumbling, And I really made headway on the garden, but they still, needed a lot of work too. So I got to work. Unfortunately, I had a background as a renovator because my first husband and I had bought a cottage after we had our daughter. And we bought a cottage in northern New Jersey because mortgage rates were going up into double digits. We really hadn't thought to buy then. We didn't have much money at all. We thought we'd better grab something before homeownership vanished over the horizon. So we sprang for this cottage, $16,000. And we winterized it. And I really thought we'd only be there 5 years while my daughter was little. Well, 5 years, stretched into 10. The housing market was still really very unfavorable. And furthermore, we moved our little business out of the city with us, and it was really hard to move it once we'd hired local people and had it on an evening keel. So we dug in and started to renovate. We literally rebuilt the house wall by wall. We even put in a new foundation. At one point, the house was on stilts, which is a very uneasy feeling to know that your house is sitting on stilts. And the crowning achievement was a 3-story addition for which I got a HUD loan at 2% for developing areas. I think they really meant it to be for the inner cities and not exurbia, but we actually met the criteria as written, which I pointed out to the very nice HUD loan officer, and so we got this nice $20,000 loan, and $20,000 was a lot more back then than it is now. So we renovated it. 10 years later, we sold it for $128,000, and we cleared about $50,000 after all the expenses. I have to say this house never felt like home. It was always under construction, but I certainly got the crash course in renovation. And I also really got the message. Developing a house, or rather renovating a house in a developing area and then turning it around and selling it is a very solid way to generate some money in this country. And this is still true. So I got to work on the old family house. I put out rat traps. I had got the porches rebuilt. I read design magazines. I hung out at the Home Depot in Ernst, which was a chain of home supply stores. It's since gone bankrupt, but they were actually a really good store. I picked the brains of contractors. I got several bids for every job, and I picked their brains, so I was talking to them. And year by year, I do my projects. I rebuilt the porches, I rebuilt the deck, I put in a new patio, I eventually put in a new roof, a new hot water heater, and a new furnace when the one that was dated from 1942 finally came to the end of the trail. So in between trips to the Home Depot in Ernst, I ran into my current husband, and we married, and my home became our home. It was a really big help to us not to have to pay a mortgage or rent. So I retrained in web and marketing, and he got advanced computer certificates, and we got good jobs. And we were happy. We really were. However, prices of homes started to rise in Seattle year by year, not to mention the property taxes. Finally, it got to be in 2006, it was so expensive to buy a house in Seattle that really a couple with both people working at usual types of wages really could not afford to buy. So it was getting to be time to sell. I could tell it was. We were enduring long commutes to the east side. I was really tired of that huge lawn and its endless watering and reseeding. And I sold in a private sale to a neighbor for 3 times the valuation at Dad's death. The next year was 2007. The market peaked, then 2008 was the Grand Recession, there was a real estate crash. But I got my money out. And so my old home, to which I'm infinitely grateful, really did its job. It more than did its job. It nurtured me as a child, it nurtured me as an adult, And in its last act, it financed my retirement.
Thank you, Claire. Every house has a story. And I appreciate yours because I got tired of a large house and a big yard, and I now live in the Burien town square condominiums, which is wonderful. So our next speaker is Gaylord Sisson. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes.
Oh, good. I worked on it. Thank you. Gaylord is a retired educator, lifetime philosopher, and a natural science writer and political activist. He's busy on Burien Arts Commission Board as African American Writers Alliance co-chair and membership of 3 writers study groups. He's been a guest speaker for the American Association of University Women, has written articles for the University of Washington's Voice and Plant Amnesty, a horticultural organization. He is a published poet whose themes are scientific phenomenons, natural sciences, and personal political opinions. He's also a novelist and short stories writer and publisher of his debut novel, Down the Road a Piece. Wow, you are a busy, busy man, and most likely very talented. So welcome. Come on up, Gaylord.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to stand over here because I just finished reading an essay by Neil Tyson. You know who he is. And he said, "Don't stand behind the podium." You did a good job.
Can't see me.
So what I'm going to talk about regarding coming home, I hope I remember all the details I got sitting there. Now, this took place in, 1968, a long time ago. And the coming home started off with, I was teaching elementary school, and one of the parents of my students had just won, had just broke the Guinness World Record of tandem bicycling from San Diego to New York. And I did not have a car, so I bicycled all over the place. So I was definitely in shape. And we talked about bicycling all the time, and I said, "Oh, yes." And at that time, he had bicycles from Vancouver, Canada to San Francisco. And I thought I could do that. So I got all ready to do that. And, oops, sorry. And probably the week that I was getting ready to go, on the newspaper, it said that some skinheads from the Aryan Congress had killed this Ethiopian man because of the color of his skin. And I'm all ready to go, and oh my God, and this is in Oregon. And I said, man, what's going to happen to me? I'm going to do it anyway. I really can't believe anybody going to bother me. I'll get on my bicycle and ride away. I was silly. But I did. I took a train here to Seattle, and then a boat to Vancouver Island, and then to Vancouver, Canada, to Swanston, where I got off, and bicycled all the way downtown Vancouver, turned around, and I headed home. I had that killing in the back of my mind, but everybody that I met was really amazed that I had this goal to get to San Francisco. And I had decided that I'm going to bicycle 100 miles a day. And anyway, first thing in the morning, I was just flying. But towards the 100th mile, well, I was going 15 miles an hour, but except the last hour, it took me 2 hours to go 15 miles. I was so tired. That was important because later on of my story, I'll tell you why. But I stopped here in Seattle where I had a friend, and I stayed there for a few days. I wasn't racing to get home. I just wanted to do 100 miles an hour. I mean 100 miles a day. Excuse me. And then when I left Seattle, on my way to Oregon, I stopped at this farmhouse that had a little lake there, and they had some swans in their lake. And I threw up my tent, and put my bicycle and myself in the tent, and went to sleep. And in the morning, this man said, "Hey, hey, hey!" And lo and behold, he was the owner of the property. He said, "We saw you sleeping out here. Thought you might want to come in for breakfast." So I went in and introduced me to their daughter, my age, and we talked and had breakfast. And I jumped on my bicycle and took off again. And somebody said, "Hey, there's a bicycle trail from here to Portland," and showed me all these little marks on the ground. I didn't know anything about the Portland thing then. And I just followed that all the way to Portland. Stayed in Portland about 4 days, and then took off and went to the coastline to Lincoln City, where I met these 3 guys. Well, I forgot to tell you that I had just graduated from Sacramento State with a master's degree in computer science. So all we were interested in is talking about computers. And so we took off. And there was this nice little pink cottage, I'll never forget it, right on the coastline, Highway 1. And so I went up there for breakfast, ate breakfast. It was delicious. And I said to the owners, 2 elderly women, that I was going to go back to camp, get ready to go, but I was going to tell all my bicycle friends to come there for breakfast. And they said, "Oh, no, we don't want to have them there." I go, "Why not? Why not?" "Oh, every time they bend over, their testicles bend all out." I go, "Oh, I never would notice that." So, took off, and they were doing 85 miles instead of 100. And I found that last 15 miles that I wanted to go to really didn't matter. I was having a great time talking about computers, and so we bicycled for the rest of the way, stopping in Coos Bay. And in Coos Bay, we were going to just stay overnight, but there was these 4 women from Germany there. This is before I met my wife, by the way. And so we just had a great time socializing with them and going out and bicycling. They were on bicycles too, but they were coming up this way, we were going that way. So we all stayed together and talked. And then we took off and bicycled all the way down to Ingerness, which is right across from the San Francisco Bridge. And then that was the first time we went into a hotel and actually had a bed to sleep in, and it was great. And it was great, and we had, for the first time ever in my life, what is that, orange juice and champagne?
Mimosa.
Yeah, mimosa. I had never had one of those, and so I love them. Every year I have some, just in honor of that. And and settled down in Sacramento for a while. And a long story short, those guys that I bicycled with, we ended up starting a computer business in Canada. We had offices in each of the provinces, and we were very successful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gailey. You remind me of some of the beautiful places I've been on the Oregon coast, but having bicycled maybe just 20 miles in a pair of blue jeans instead of, padded pants, I don't think I could do that many miles on any day. But I love your story. Our next person to tell a story is Debbie Dixon. Debbie is the author of The Path to Freedom, Your Guide to Living the Life of Your Dreams. She is a life coach, inspirational speaker, sound healer, and yoga teacher, who is founder of Love is the Truth, a nonprofit organization that assists people in elevating their consciousness out of fear, scarcity, and lack into joy, peace, and love. Come on up, Debbie.
I feel like after being told I should stand on the other side, but now I feel silly standing behind the podium, but I want to deal with the microphone. I'm not used to holding a mic. The idea of home. To me, I started there. Just what is the idea of home? How do I consider it? And as I thought about home, I discovered that it really hasn't changed much in my mind from when I was a child to now. To me, it's just a societal construct, right? This concept of home. And when I think of home, I think small, I think limited, I think suffocating, I think stuck. And it's not obviously literally small. I mean, I recognize that houses come in all shapes and sizes, and mine was actually quite large growing up on the scope of things. But more if you were to consider looking at things from a broader scope, a universal scope, when you recognize your ownership in the entire earth, when you see yourself as stewards of this land, right? And beyond that, that we have ownership in the stars and the moon and the sun and the cosmos. We are not limited until we decide that. And so when I started to look at that, and as a child, I viewed my home very much as this limiting place. I mean, for me, it was nothing different than a prison. And from that universal scope, you really see it that way, this tiny locked up box with locks on it and alarms. And I had wardens, I'm sure you did too, people that were, giving you rules and punishing you if you disobeyed them. And when you disobeyed, your punishment oftentimes as a child was to get put in your cell or your tiny room, right, in segregation from the and so this is the way, I saw home as a place I wanted to break free of and escape. I remember sitting in my room just staring out the window, just like, I just want to be free. I don't want somebody telling me what to do. I want to explore the world for myself, not from your experience. Don't tell me your experience. Let me see. Let me feel the world. Let me experience it for myself. And so I was really frustrated as a child from that standpoint, looking out at this world I wasn't allowed to experience. And then I finally was free. One day I did escape, as we all did, right? I landed in the world, and I loved it. I think at one point, it's like somewhere in me is this memory maybe of a past life where I was a wild animal that just roamed free, and that is definitely a part of who I am. So the second I was free, I wanted to roam. I traveled everywhere. I was doing much like a friend that was just standing up here, staying wherever I could, hostels, tents, I just wanted to see the world. Most recently, I just got back from Thailand. And being in Thailand for a few weeks, you may or may not know, their economy relies a lot on tourism. And a big part of their tourism is elephants. And this just had me thinking because how many of you have seen an elephant? Yeah? Pretty familiar with elephants. You've seen them in the zoo, maybe. They're fairly robust animals. Yes, large. Yes. Yeah. Yet somehow these people managed to have them tame like puppies, right? They let us, when we were in Thailand, you could ride them. I did not opt for these things, but you could. They would have them walk right up to you, and these are giant animals. Why are they not crushing us? Why are they not running away? Why aren't they? Their freedom was right there. They could just run across the river right into the jungle, yet they didn't. And so I asked, how does that happen? Well, they train them. They start training them just much like us when they're very young, babies, because that's when they're manageable, right? They're so small. They're still big, by the way, as babies, but they're small enough that they can tie them up to a post with a chain, and that chain can actually hold them. So, and then what they'll do is they'll make them want something. It might be the rest of their elephant friends. They are definitely animals that like to run together, like to be together. And so the elephant, the baby elephant, will fight and fight and fight and fight and fight, trying to get free until it stops. At the moment it stops, the trainer knows that that animal is broken, and then they can walk with the animal. They might keep the chain on them for a while, walking with them, and they just wait until they can walk by the rest of the elephants and see no reaction. They wait until they recognize that they have the power over this animal. And then eventually they can remove the chain, they just have to hold something, and the animal still has this. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is because I wonder if that animal views that trainer as, and that space as their home. I wonder if that animal recognizes that there's a whole world, that, if there's a part of that animal, much like me, that still remembers, maybe from just passed down in its genes from its ancestors, that it ran free at some point, and if it longs for it, And then I come home from these trips, and I'm walking around and I see people tending to their yards. I see them going right up to the boundaries, right up to the property lines. Like they all have these little markers, these little spaces that this is mine, that is yours. I'll go up and I'll clean right up to my edge, take care of it. And I wonder if they recognize their ownership in all of it. That they are not limited by this space, that it's all yours. And for me, now as I travel, I've found myself, in the Andes Mountains in Peru, and in the jungles of Costa Rica, and the beaches and the deserts, and all over the place. And I recognize that when I'm in these places, I can feel like I'm at home. I can look up at the stars, and it's just a return to my heart. It's a place within. And it is all of it, without limit. And I'm so surprised that I didn't get a number shook up at me. But so hopefully I'm close to 7 minutes. But I thank you so much, everyone, for allowing me this time.
So our next speaker is Jeff Heiss. Did I pronounce it right?
Heiss, yep.
Good. He's a lifetime resident of Washington, having grown up in Kent. He was a gymnast in high school and still does a pretty decent handstand. Do we get a demo?
Thought about that.
Okay.
Let's see, better not.
Okay. He figures he's not old if he can still do a handstand, though they are getting more difficult these days. Story time is an opportunity for Jeff to share life events and to practice another skill he hopes to improve.
My dad has had a rental house for 47 years. In October of this last year, the tenants moved out, having lived there for 17 years. As you can imagine, it needed some work. I am a contractor, and I was happy to agree to help my dad in painting and flooring and some hardware upgrades to the house for the new tenants. We had done the same thing to the house 17 years ago when the previous tenants had moved out after having lived there for 20 years. At that time, my oldest son, who was 14 then, helped on the project, and I remember him pressure washing his name, Tyler, on the fence in the backyard that he was supposed to be washing the moss off of. And he has now made me a grandpa twice. Well, this isn't just any house. This is a house that I grew up in. We moved out when I was 10. It is there that I learned to ride a bike on the driveway across the street. And I got in trouble because we weren't supposed to be outside of our driveway without permission. And the woods across the street are now houses. And the woods behind our house is now a school. And I have a friend who lives 3 houses down and another one a few blocks away. Up around the corner are my in-laws. I married their daughter. Now we are not still together, but we all are still friends, and I stopped there during our project to eat lunch. I still remember our phone number, 852-4618. That was before there were prefixes. Now, I'm a thinker, and I think on life, so much so that I drive my family and my friends crazy because I'm always thinking on life. As you can imagine, returning to a childhood home many decades later, there's lots of fodder for consideration. For one, that many years is likely half a lifetime, and most of working years. One day, my dad and I were working on the house, and he was in the bathroom across the hall, I was working in the one bedroom that we still had a label for, Lori's room. I'm not sure why none of the other rooms were labeled. I think partly because my brothers and I shared rooms, which I don't think kids do these days, to share rooms. And in my style, fashion, and form, I provoke some thought, some consideration. That being, how do you measure a life lived? What is a successful life? And also true to my form, I propose an answer, which is that we are reminded at funerals. There's a certain irony of sort that we spend a lifetime working to earn money, to buy things, to earn more money, to maintain those things, to make more money, to upgrade those things, and then at our funerals, there's no mention of the money and the things that we buy. And while my dad and I were talking, seemingly without much thought, he says, I think they will say about you that you were a good dad. And tears welled up in my eyes. My dad was telling me that in his eyes, I would be remembered as a good dad. I had heard that before from him, but I dismissed it. I had lived most of my life thinking myself to be a disappointment to my dad. I was supposed to go to college, which I did, and work for a corporation and stockpile a bunch of money and retire, and I chose a different path. And here my dad was telling me that in his eyes, I would be remembered as a good dad. Now there are lots of things I'd like to be remembered for. Tall, dark, handsome, funny, witty, intelligent, creative, a Renaissance man, even stubborn and bullheaded. I don't mind those things. I am those things. And admittedly, I'd like to report that more had been, I could report more during those 40-some years. But if the one thing that I possibly am remembered for or thought of when I'm gone is being a good dad, there is no higher measure for me. I had returned home of sort, the house in which I'd grown up in, and you might agree with me that perhaps it's not my place or my dad's to decide whether I'm a good dad. That would be up to my children, one of whom I believe is watching right now. I may have to ask. You may also agree that there is probably no one else in our lives whose words mean more than those that come from our fathers. So returning to this home, my childhood home, I had lots of opportunity to reflect on life. I spent time working with my dad, talking with my dad, received a great gift from my dad. And sadly, too, I discovered that his mind is beginning to wane, which also brought tears to my eyes, for that is what took my grandmother and my aunt. That, though, is a story for a different time. During another conversation with my dad, he said, you know, one day we're probably going to look back on this and be glad for the experience. And I said, I am now.
It is a good reminder to all of us that it's not what we accumulate, but who we are and the kind of person that we are, that we are remembered for. And you certainly reminded us of that. Thank you. So our next storyteller is skipping ahead to our March theme, because she will not be here in March and wants to tell that story. March is advice to my younger self and or the rearview mirror. Deborah Valpay is a longtime Highline area resident, retired HHS teacher, mom to 4, grandma to 8. This is a busy woman also, a Unitarian lay minister, amateur poet, and aspiring artist. But she doesn't wash windows because she prefers to open the doors and pray for wind. She is calendar challenged, and that's why her topic should have been scheduled in March, but she'll be out of the country then. Let's hope she remembers when her plane is due to leave. We wanted to hear her story, so we're happy she is here. as a teaser to the future theme. Advice to my younger self, rearview mirror. The size of your thighs doesn't matter. Your mother will forgive you even that. And love is not only a feeling, but a decision. So, Deborah.
Thank you so much. I'm going to tell you a little story about my life in a way that I wish I had understood a long time ago. From a very young age, I believed that my body was betraying me. For one thing, I was way too tall. I got my adult height when I was 10 years old. I was taller than my mother, taller than my teacher, taller than all the boys, and I hated it. My mother tried to reassure me. Oh, honey, I was tall at your age too, but I was already taller than she was, and I was only 10 and she was 35. So I was not comforted by that. Then she had a solution. She said, I'm going to feed you a lot of black coffee because that's going to stunt your growth. And I said, bring it on. So man, I guzzled that stuff. It had to be black because she was from Swedish tradition and you don't put stuff in your coffee. So nothing much happened for a little while. Then I got my period at age 10. And then I got acne before my friends even knew how to spell it. And it was a very tough time. But, drum roll, I did stop growing. Now, I still had an image of myself as a very tall person. But I'm finally getting over that. In fact, now, at 5'3", yay, mature shrinkage, I can shop in the petite department. Now, I also was convinced that my thighs were too big and that they were too jiggly. I was told that tan fat is more attractive than white fat, so I tried my utmost to get a tan down thereabouts. However, I was living in Kansas at the time, and the summer sun was just brutal, so I would just go, claw, claw, claw. Finally, I gave up, and I decided that I would embrace A-line skirts, because they will hide all kinds of problems. My boobs were too small. Too small for what, you might ask? For a D? Yup. For a C? Yup. For a good B? Yup. So I struggled with that too, until about 30-some years ago, I wrote a little poem, and I wish I had written it when I was much younger. It goes like this: Ode to Small Breasts. Fresh and firm at 42, you are, I do believe, two of my sweeter features. My face betrays our true age, but if you were bigger, we'd not belie the naked truth. Gravity rules. Then there was the hair. My brothers had luxurious, wavy hair. I had hair. And they didn't care about it. They'd wash it with soap and push it out of their eyes so they could see where they were going. But I fretted over my hair. Now, when the Fab Four came, I chopped it off so I could be like them, homage to them. Then when I learned that Paul, yes, McCartney, liked birds with long straight hair, I grew it out and I actually ironed it on the ironing board. It sad little miserable efforts at waviness. So it went, now it kind of goes. And then I discovered teasing. I permed it, I hennaed it, and I never stopped to think, how nice that I even have hair. So I decide now, as I'm looking back, I wish I realized how much time I wasted fretting about my body. As I proceed through my 8th decade of life, I've decided that I'm not going to color it. I'm not going to go under the knife for a tighter cheekline because it would just call attention to those thighs and screw it. Now, my second bit of advice, your mother will forgive you even that, goes back to my college years. My father left when I was about 14 to marry a much younger woman and start a new family. So we had very little money. It was really, really tight. I shopped at garage sales with my mother to get my school clothes. We bought food at the local sundry store on credit, you know, little cans of soup and stuff when the child support check was late, the $25 a month child support check. And somehow I was able to finance going away to school at Western. It was $250 a year tuition and fees, and a little bit more for books, and I lived real cheaply. But she had scrimped and saved to buy me a leather jacket. And one day at school, I snagged my leather jacket. I was horrified. All she had gone through to get me this jacket. So I come home from school, and I walk up to her and I say, Mom, I got something terrible to tell you. Something bad has happened. She says, what? I was sweating paper clips. Oh my God, what am I gonna do? So I finally said, Mom, I snagged my leather jacket, and I showed her the little snag. And she laughed and laughed. She said, I thought you were gonna tell me you were pregnant. So she got out the super glue. Crisis avoided. Now I'm sure I disappointed her from time to time, and I didn't tell her about everything that I did. But I knew always that she loved me and that she was proud of me, and she boasted too much to her friends at the retirement home about my accomplishments. However, never always, my advice then to my younger self is just take the love as a gift. And it's okay not to tell them everything. Now, love is a verb, it's a decision, it's action, and it took me a long time to learn about this. I greatly desired my father's attention, and he wasn't really interested in children. I was the oldest and the only girl, and after he left, I kind of chased after him by writing letters, and he never responded. And I realize now, advice would have been to a younger me, find some appropriate male role models. You gotta have an uncle or a teacher or somebody, because a girl needs to learn about men. And fathers are the first teachers of girls about men, but they don't have to be the only ones. So then I decided, I gotta get married now. And I had a boyfriend in college, and I decided, okay, we're going to get married. Thank you. I will wind up very quickly. And I had to do it right away because I had this feeling, you see. And if I waited even through the end of the summer, something might happen. So I married between my junior and senior year, and I was married for 10 years until I realized I had to leave. So my advice would be, take a little bit of time. Then I married again, a man who was old enough to be my father. Not a bad person at all, but someone with whom I could not make connection. We couldn't make room for each other's thoughts, ideas. We were both just way too rigid. So I figured, well, screw it, I can't do this. I'm just gonna have to join the nunnery. And I realized I could attract men. I could recreate, and I had several short-lived romances, which were kind of fun, but they were not nourishing and they were exhausting. Then, when I was 36, I met Ray Valby, and as many years since, we have been together, and we have grown, we have loved, we have argued a little bit, we have made a lot of room for each other, both to grow as individuals, but also to nurture that precious relationship. And I thank Ray Valby for not only finding me, but also for making that commitment along with me and deciding that this verb is worth it. Okay, final words. You did okay, kid. And I wonder what kind of advice your 90-something-year-old might give your 70-something-year-old. So I'm going to start working on that right now. Thank you so much.
So thank you so much. That was very, very nice. We've all got rear view mirrors, I'm sure. But I don't think my story would be quite as entertaining, so thank you. You made me smile anyway. So that's our stories for tonight. I do want to remind you that this is just the beginning of our year, and we have a full house with the turnaways today. So stories are meaningful to our community. I would encourage you to come and enjoy, and also to come and tell a story. It seemed to be pretty daunting the first time I did it, but you know, it works out. And we all have things that we can share that will have meaning for other people, or just entertaining, which we all need, particularly in the world we live in right now. You guys made me smile tonight, and I think we all need that. So, coming up, February 24th, Tipping Point, Stories of Enough is Enough, Fed Up. In March, Advice to My Younger Self, and or The Rear View Mirror, which we just got a preview of. And in April, It Seemed Like a Good Idea at the Time. I know, looking out at this room, we all have probably any number of those stories. So I'm looking forward to them in the future. And I certainly look forward to seeing all of you next month, and also to hearing more stories from our wonderful Burien and Highland Park neighbors. So thank you for coming tonight. I hope I didn't forget anything, except that I am going to take this out to the lobby so you can sign up with your email if you would like to. So thank you very much for joining us today.